What's up, everybody? It's Taylor Twellman from Major League Soccer and Apple TV. Now that the international break is over, the Audi MLS Cup playoffs return this weekend with all 8 teams hitting their strides at the right time. A doubleheader both Saturday and Sunday will determine the conference finals participants, what to watch for, what makes each matchup intriguing to watch, and more importantly, who's the pressure on. Well, let's do this. Twellman takes. The book of the Hudson River Derby has 29 chapters in it, and some of the league's most memorable moments have come in these games. May 2015 was the first chapter, and it still resonates today, as Bradley Wright Phillips scored 2 that day, and he still remains the leading scorer in this rivalry. Who can forget the Red Wedding almost a year later when the New York Red Bulls beat New York City FC at Yankee Stadium 7-0. That motivated David Villa in New York City to return the favor in 2017 when he scored his first MLS hat-trick, which was then followed almost 3 years later by Tati Castellanos, who scored his hat-trick versus Red Bulls in 2020 to win at home. And the most recent, September 28th, Red Bull Arena was blue, as New York City had its most lopsided victory in this rivalry, winning 5-1 on the road. Alonso Martinez with a brace that day, as he also led City with 16 goals on the season. So many twists and turns to get to this point, and the most interesting nugget is this. In the 4 games in the knockout round competition between these two teams, the Red Bulls have won all 4, shutting out New York City in all 4 as well. But they've never played on the road, as all 4 of those games were at Red Bull Arena. New York City can host their rival in a must-win game for the first time this Saturday. Now, the Red Bulls came into the playoffs limping, winning only 3 of their last 18 games in MLS. But they took on defending champion Columbus Crew and were efficient in the biggest moments. Carlos Coronel was brilliant with timely saves in regulation and then stealing the show with 3 saves in the penalty shootout. He's had great success against New York City with 6 career shutouts. He is going to have to be as good, if not better, if they're going to advance. But the X factor for them, Lewis Morgan. The MLS Comeback Player of the Year has a goal contribution in 3 straight playoff games, and he can kill you on the counter with his pace and direct style that can cause real issues for the back line of New York City. Now, in goal for New York City, Matt Freese. He was a snub for me in the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year race, not even making it as a finalist, considering he was second in MLS in goals prevented, according to True Media. He was stellar against FC Cincinnati, and I expect more of the same from him at home. But this team will only go as far as they can if Santi Rodriguez takes them there. He's always been their guy, especially at home. 11 goals, 8 assists at home is nothing to sneeze at. And he's cheeky with and without the ball, elusive in tight spaces, which is so important with the short confines of Citi Field. Now, he hasn't been great against the New York Red Bulls because their style hinders his ability to get into rhythm. But if the 2021 MLS Cup champions want to get their rivals, he will have to take them there. It's safe to say that this is the biggest Hudson River Derby to date because, yes, it's in the playoffs, but more so, Miami, Columbus, Cincinnati have all lost. Both of these teams believe MLS Cup is a possibility. The marquee matchup of the weekend is at BMO Stadium, where LAFC will host the Seattle Sounders in a game that has been top billing in MLS for a long time. Seattle have been to 4 MLS Cups. They've won 2 of those, while also winning the 2022 CONCACAF Champions League. You put that up with the Supporters Shield they won in 2014, along with the 4 U.S. Open Cup trophies, and the Sounders have to find success in the Western Conference. That's until LAFC joined MLS. LAFC have scored more goals and more points than every other team in the league since they joined. They've won an MLS Cup, an Open Cup, and 2 Supporters Shield, but they've also could have had more, a lot more. They've lost an MLS Cup final and a Leagues Cup final to the Columbus Crew, a Campeones Cup, and a CONCACAF Champions League final as well. But here's one thing about them that's been consistent. They are dominant at home. In fact, since 2022, in all competitions, they've hosted 72 games. They've only lost 12 of those. And oddly enough, 8 of those 12 were in one season, 2023. Now, both teams have a style and a brand that other teams have tried to emulate with little to no success. LAFC is coming off another historic season where they've earned 60-plus points for the 3rd time in their history while securing the top seed in the West in dramatic fashion on the final day of the regular season. This past offseason, they went out and got some experience, especially in goal. Hugo Lloris, who is no stranger to big games, having played more games than anyone has for the French national team, including 2 World Cup finals. He's also been very good. 12 clean sheets, while helping this team get to 2 finals, winning the U.S. Open Cup at home against Sporting Kansas City. But this team goes how Denis Bouanga goes. Back-to-back 20-goal seasons in MLS regular seasons. He's played in 11 playoff games and has 8 goals. But it's the form at home that is crazy. He's played 54 games at home. He has 54 goal contributions. It's impossible to track him for 90 minutes. His pace with and without the ball is no different. The ability to score on the run like the one he scored in this same game last year at Seattle is the reason why he'll be giving Brian Schmetzer nightmares leading up to this game. Now, the Seattle Sounders have made the playoffs 14 of their 15 MLS seasons. They are a given, hitting their stride at the right time, but differently than LAFC. Since 2018, they've given up the fewest amount of goals than anyone in MLS and are second in points to none other than LAFC. 2024, more of the same. 35 goals given up, 13 clean sheets. That's to lead MLS respectively. Now, Stefan Frei has an argument for the best goalkeeper in MLS playoff history. 15 clean sheets. That's first all time. But it's the ability to make the save out of nowhere. Think of 2016 MLS Cup against Josie Altidore in Toronto, or the point-blank save on Tati Castellanos in the 88th minute to get to the CONCACAF Champions League final. I get it, he's 38 years old. But with the same back line in front of him for 2 straight years, he could be the difference maker, especially because Seattle aren't dangerous. They only scored 51 goals this year. And to make it even more interesting, against the teams in the top 7 of both conferences, they only scored 16 goals in 13 games. They were barely dangerous against Houston. And if they want to surprise LAFC on the road, like they did in 2019, which I will argue against anyone was the best performance by a Seattle team ever in MLS, think about this. That was only one of 5 wins against LAFC in 22 tries. They need goals, and they will need one badly from Jordan Morris, who has only 1 goal in his last 11 appearances against LAFC. That's a total of 976 minutes. Can he get one by against his national teammate Aaron Long? That's going to be the biggest question for the Sounders at LA. Now, it was fair to say that before the season started, both Atlanta United and Orlando City would be in the MLS Conference Semifinals. Many of us expected it. Atlanta United had a star duo of Giokaoumakis and Almada, while Orlando City went into the playoffs last year as arguably the hottest team in the playoffs, and then they lost to eventual winner Columbus Crew. So that would continue. But it didn't. Orlando City only won 4 of their first 18 games. Atlanta United, they sell Giokaoumakis and Almada and Caleb Wiley, and they fire their coach Gonzalo Pineda. In fact, a month ago, Atlanta United needed a win at Orlando City and a lot of help to even make the playoffs. They only had a 10% chance of making the playoffs on the final day of the regular season, and they did that with a win at Orlando and a little bit of help of VAR. But they then had to take a quick trip to Montreal. They win in penalty shootouts against their all-time leading goal scorer, Josef Martinez. More on him in a minute. And then took down the almighty Lionel Messi and Inter Miami on the back of, or should I say, hands of Brad Guzan. It's crazy to me to think of the history between Orlando City and Atlanta United, that this will be the first time they play in the playoffs. Yet recent memory will tell you, good for Atlanta United. They beat Orlando City both games this year. But there is a rich hatred between these two teams ever since Josef Martinez and the Atlanta fan base, the 17s, deemed him the daddy of Orlando City, which means this game should deliver on multiple levels. And speaking of the daddy, Brad Guzan, he's hit the fountain of youth at age 40. He's made 40 saves in the 4 playoff games this year. 40 for 40. That was terrible. But the point is this, the former U.S. men's national team goalkeeper has been the rock, the foundation of this remarkable run, because now players have that little bit of extra energy to go for it, to not be scared because their goalkeeper can bail them out. Now, most of you would think I will say Jamal Chare is the X factor, especially after his Game 3 performance versus Miami with 2 goals. But it's not. It's their big money signing, Alexei Miranchuk. He has to be brilliant. He's got the ability to open up the game with his vision. He can score the fantastic goal, but mostly the creative mind, the player that can unlock this Orlando City defense. Orlando City were a top 3 team in MLS defending at home. Mainly, Pedro Gallese returned to the form of late last year. But after a slow start, Orlando City have been the best team in MLS since July 1st. They've won 36 points in that time, and their goalkeeper has been a big reason why. Not making silly mistakes and just being solid has limited the damage. But in my humble opinion, it's not him. It's Facundo Torres that's made the difference. Orlando City moved Martin Ojeda to the number 10 spot. And since that move, Torres has 13 goals and 3 assists. Now this offseason, he's going to be a hot commodity on the world market and someone who may get a real big offer that will be difficult to turn down. But right now, Oscar Pereira and company, they only hope he has a couple more games in him like he had against Charlotte to get Orlando City past their father and into MLS Cup. On paper, this looks like the easiest one to predict. The pedigree of the LA Galaxy with 5 MLS Cups, more than any team in MLS history, against a team that many of us didn't expect to be here, the Loons of Minnesota United. Now, Minnesota United got hot at the end of the season, winning 7 of the last 10 games, but only 2 of those were against playoff teams. So many of us didn't think they'd get by Real Salt Lake, but they did, because their style of play is suited for knockout round competition. They're competent in their structure, but more so, they're confident on the road. They won 8 games on the road this year. They picked up 27 points away from home, which both of those are best in the Western Conference. And if you look at the 2 games between these 2 teams this year, Minnesota United showed you the recipe of how to play the Galaxy. Set-piece goals, dynamic and killer in transition. Both of those they did in scoring 3 goals against the Galaxy. But it was actually the half where they held the Galaxy without a shot or a corner. The first time and the only time the Galaxy were held like that in 36 games this year. But can they do that for 90 minutes? I don't know. Dane St. Clair has to be massive because in the 14 games that the opposition has scored 2 or more goals against Minnesota United, Minnesota has only won 1 of those games. And it's not easy when you're going up against this version of the LA Galaxy. Peck, Paintsil, Pooch, Joveljic, 4 players with 20-plus goal contributions or more. And they've got multiple players that can hurt you. And we're not even talking about Marco Reus, their summer signing. Gabriel Peck, the MLS Newcomer of the Year, he can beat you for pace, but also in areas where he has to break you down on the dribble, he can do that as well. And you couple that with Ricky Pooch, it's not going to matter whether or not Minnesota United will sit in and defend deep, because this team loves possession, and they can play in that kind of game. They haven't lost in Carson this year, and it's not easy trying to unbalance them, especially when they're in rhythm. That's the Colorado Rapids, who gave up 9 goals in 2 games. The LA Galaxy lost the number 1 seed on the final play of the regular season, and it feels like that is the motivating factor for them to be even better. And could we get El Tráfico for the Western Conference Final? Don't miss our live coverage leading into every game of the MLS Cup playoffs with a 30-minute pregame show into every game. Saturday, we kick it off at 5 p.m. Eastern in New York City for the Hudson River Derby, followed by 10 p.m. Eastern in LA for the Marquee Matchup, LAFC versus the Seattle Sounders. Then on Sunday, 3 p.m. for the Cinderella story. Yep, Cinderella. Atlanta United versus Orlando City, followed by 5:30 p.m. Eastern back in California for the Galaxy and the Loons. All of this on MLS Season Pass on Apple TV.